Now, Jake, thousands of people came out today to pay tribute to Shinzo Abe in a final farewell.
That is true. There were a fair number of people around the Capitol and at the temple where he was, where the funeral services were held earlier in the day. And people were expressing their parting thoughts. The hearse, which had him in there, took around across the Parliament building and the official headquarters of the Prime Minister, where he'd spent so much of his time. And everyone said their farewells. The turnout probably wasn't as big as people expected, but he was a very divisive figure.
Well, elections were held on Sunday as planned, but it has been a sombre mood. How are people in Japan feeling?
I think everyone is shocked that it happened. And I think that gun violence is so rare in Japan that it's taken the nation by storm. But to say that the entire nation was deeply in mourning would be an exaggeration because of the nature of Shinzo Abe himself. But certainly people are wondering what were the motives of the man that did this heinous crime.
Well, police have revealed more about the suspected gunman. What have they said?
Well, it is very odd because the gunman claims that he attacked Abe Shinzo because his mother was very deeply involved with the Unification Church and donated a lot of money in that, which made the family destitute, and that Abe had connections to the Unification Church, and that by attacking Abe, he was taking revenge on the church. The Japanese media will not name the church, not the mainstream media, and they haven't for days. One Japanese periodical finally named the group today. And it is true that Abe, through his grandfather and through his political activities, did have some tenuous connections to the Unification Church, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense because the connections are so tenuous that it doesn't really justify what the killer did, nor does it really make much sense.
Well, local media reporting that his former colleagues describe him as totally normal and seemingly earnest.
Yes, but there are also other people who said his behavior was slightly odd and that he was withdrawn. He had time in the military service. No known records of violence, no outburst, no criminal record. So yes, his behavior is very hard to decipher.
And going back to your point about the church, Shinzo Abe and his family had known links to the Unification Church, but the organisation has said he was never a member or an advisor. What else do we know about the church?
Well, we know that Abe made greetings to a sort of front company owned by the Unification Church, and this was written up in the Korean media. We know that his grandfather, Kishi, was very close to the founder of the Unification Church, Reverend Moon, because they allied over sort of anti-communist efforts. So there was this family background going to his grandfather, and Abe had some connections in taking funds from them and also speaking on behalf of one organization that was involved with the Unification Church. As we know, the connections are very loose, and politicians in Japan often use religious groups to gain votes, just like their coalition partners. Komeito is very, very much tied up with Soka Gakkai, which is a Buddhist religious organization in Japan.
Well, turning to the politics in Japan now, how might Mr. Abe's absence change the balance of power within the Liberal Democratic Party going forward?
That is a very good question because Abe was so powerful that he sort of became the Liberal Democratic Party. And the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, which except for maybe 3 years, has ruled since 1955, used to be a very interesting, diverse party within itself. It had moderates, it had liberals, it had conservatives, it had radicals. And with Abe gone and no one to center it, you may see the Liberal Democratic Party become more liberal and more democratic, two things that it was never really before.
Will it lead to policy changes and reforms under Prime Minister Fumio Kishida?
I think so. I think when Kishida talks about a new capitalism, which no one really understands what that is, he does seem to be more interested in addressing the inequality between the rich and the poor in Japan that Abenomics created and made worse. So I think that in the end, it's an opportunity for Kishida to do the things that he wanted to do without Abe snapping at his heels and holding him back. It may be a plus for the Kishida administration, sadly enough.
Just finally, in what respects does Shinzo Abe's vision for Japan live on?
In the sense that he wanted to change the constitution and bring it back to a pre-war constitution with less emphasis on basic human rights and pacifism, as his grandfather so wanted to do when he was prime minister. In his dream of sort of revising the constitution and taking Japan back to the 1930s, maybe posthumously he's a little closer.
Jack Adelstein in Tokyo, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.